we had expected, and we're just really excited. This Tea Party is meant to be a demonstration organized of, by, and for the students and citizens of Auburn, Alabama, who are no longer willing to tolerate an irresponsible, narcissistic government, Republican and Democrat alike. We are tired of a government that continues to rapidly infringe on individual liberties while creating an enormous and financially bloated government programs that are crippling America's future generations. As college students, it's difficult for many of us to grasp this economic issues at hand. We aren't paying income taxes. We're not watching our 401ks melt away. We aren't witnessing our stocks depreciate in value daily. So many college students are asking themselves, why does this economic recession really affect me? Why should I be following it? Why do I care? I'm here to tell you that it absolutely does affect you. It's time for my generation to wake up and recognize that we are the ones who are going to be paying off this national debt. For over 4 decades, the federal government has sought to solve the problems of economic disparity and unemployment through government planning and intervention. But the more these plans fail, the more the planners plan. Our founding fathers knew that outside of reasonable functions, government cannot perform near as well as the private sector of the economy. So I now must ask myself, can my generation even begin to comprehend the capacity of the freedoms that were established to us by our founding fathers? Has this great nation sunk so deep into the idea of big government coercion and control that people my age actually believe that a small intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives better than we can plan our own? Well, I'm here to tell you that the answer is no. It's time we take our government back. It's time we stand up for the freedoms bestowed upon us by our founding fathers. It's time we carried our message of smaller government and lower taxes to every American, regardless of age or political party. We've gathered here today because of a common belief that the American people deserve better than those elected to our nation's highest offices. And don't you think it's about time that we stand united in our resolve to do something about it? Yeah. I refuse to stand by and watch this country destroy itself under less than mediocre leadership and repeatedly make the same mistakes of its predecessors. It's time we call for a rebirth of the American tradition of leadership at every level of government and in the private sector as well. Abraham Lincoln once called upon the people of all America to renew their dedication and their commitment to a government of, for, and by the people. Together, let's stand up for a new beginning. Let's demand a federal government with the capacity to serve the American people without dominating their lives. Let's demand a government that uses the same common sense that you and I use in our daily lives. Let's demand a government that respects our natural, inalienable rights that our forefathers worked so hard to craft. It's time we remind the government that the taxpayer does not exist to fund the government. In fact, it's just the opposite. The federal government exists to serve the taxpayer. Thomas Jefferson once said that every generation needs a new revolution. Well, this is my generation, and this is my revolution. I'm calling on all students and community members alike to join me in rejecting the dangers of out-of-control spending that is happening in our government today. It's time for my generation to realize that this debt is going to fall on our laps. And parents, it is your responsibility to fully inform your children of the dangers of this government spending habit, and you owe it to your children to tell them the truth. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. We all realize that this economic crisis is both deep and severe. Yet, we all hear from our leaders in Washington the same exhaustive proposals for more government dabbling, intervention, and control, which is what led us to this circumstance in the first place. Altogether, only 11% of the stimulus package had anything to do with recovery or reinvestment. Even a recession and a record $1.4 trillion budget deficit have not altered Congress's business-as-usual culture of spending. When families and entrepreneurs like us are bringing our own budgets under control, Congress is spending and earmarking as if nothing in the economy has changed. If the stimulus bill were a country, it would have the 15th largest economy in the world, and Americans like you and me were forced to borrow 100% of the unprecedented $1.2 billion price tag. I'm going to let you know on a little secret. Congress and the current administration have absolutely no intention for paying for any of this spending or an irresponsible expansion of government. They are just going to keep writing blank checks all day long and pass the debt on to my generation. The problem here is that eventually someone's going to come knocking on Congress's door asking for their money back. Whether it's China, Japan, the UK, or the big oil tycoons, ultimately they're going to demand their money, and guess what? We're not going to have it. Margaret Thatcher once said that the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money, and I think that's about to be the situation here. The stimulus package costs well over $1 billion for every single page that it was printed off on, and $400,000 for every job that it hopes to create. And the fact of the matter is that this stimulus package was based just on that. It was based on hope, not reality. It was passed without careful consideration of its long-term implications. In fact, it was passed without even being read. Realistically, government spending cannot be stimulative because every dollar that the government spends into the economy must first be taxed or borrowed out of the economy. Rather than creating new purchasing power, they're merely redistributing an existing purchasing power. Economic growth requires hard work and increased productivity of the American workers. It's driven by individuals and entrepreneurs operating in free market economies, not by Washington spending and regulations. The outdated idea that by transferring spending power from the private sector to Washington would actually help grow the economy has been thoroughly discredited, and yet our public officials still turn to the same failed policies. The massive spending hikes in the 30s, 60s, and 70s all failed to increase economic growth rates. Yet, in the 80s and 90s, when the federal government shrank by 1/5 as a percentage of GDP, the U.S. economy enjoyed its greatest expansion to date. Abraham Lincoln once said that while people retain their virtue and their vigilance, no administration by any extreme of wickedness or folly can seriously injure the government in a short span of 4 years. Well, if Mr. Lincoln could see what's happened in the past 85 days, I think he'd be weeping for his country. After observing this past election season, I couldn't help but notice a reoccurring phrase that I believe went something like, "Yes, we can." So let's try and play a little game. Let's do a chant. I'm going to say something that not only can be done, but should be done. And I want everyone to follow it by saying, "Yes, we can." Okay, so when I say a phrase, everyone say it. Cut our taxes.
Yes, we can.
Read the bills.
Yes, we can.
Dump the tea.
Yes, we can.
Keep our freedom.
Yes, we can.
Keep our money.
Yes, we can.
And keep our nation.
Yes, we can.
Those are the real yes we cans of this generation and of this economy. Not false promises and false expansion of this nation. The real yes we cans are what I just said. You see, this stimulus bill is not stimulus. It's robbery. It is fraud. It is the worst piece of economic legislation Congress has passed in 100 years. Not since the passage in 1909 of the 16th Amendment, which cleared the way for the federal income tax, has the United States of America adopted a policy so comprehensively toxic to economic freedom and so far from the tangibility of the country's economic realities. The bailout costs more than the Marshall Plan, the Louisiana Purchase, the S&L bailout, the Korean War, the New Deal, the Iraq War, the Vietnam War, and NASA's lifetime budget combined. It's time we come up with solutions. Instead of growing government, where waste and corruption run rampant, let's grow the private sector, where innovation flourishes. Instead of giving power and control of our economy to politicians and bureaucrats, let's give American small businesses the freedom to spend and invest their own money. This is not the moment for Republicans to rally in the interest of party unity. This is a time we stand up for our core beliefs of smaller government and lower taxes. We may not be able to stop this budget